Hey everyone, welcome back to Porter's Product Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Porter, and today we're zeroing in on one of the most important, most mission-driven, and most uniquely challenging markets out there, and that's education. So, from the long sales cycles to deep-held values-based messaging, marketing software in the education space really requires a thoughtful, strategic approach. So today, joining us is Tia Lendo. She's an education and marketing advisor, consultant, and board member with deep experience at the intersection of tech and impact. She spent over a decade at Google, consulted in the public sector at McKinsey, and was a teacher and holds an MBA from Stanford and earned her bachelor's degree from UNC. Tia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. As you know, I love talking about education, and it's awesome to be here with you today.
Absolutely. And for audience members, I know Tia because she interviewed me at Google, helped me get into Google. We worked on the same floor, and it was great to work with her. And she is also, as I mentioned, a UNC grad, and that's my home state. So go
Yes,
Tar
go
Heels.
Heels.
That's right. That's right. So, all right, Tia. Well, let's go ahead and start with the first question. The foundation of all of this is the buyer. How does the decision-making process in the education sector, whether it's K through 12 or higher ed, differ from under other industries? And how do you tailor your marketing strategy accordingly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with education, you really have to think both B2B, business to business, and B2C, business to consumer. And, usually the buyer and the user aren't the same people. Most of the time they are not. And so,
Yeah.
the key is really to understand who is buying, but also who's influencing, who else is helping to decide, who are the users, and importantly, what streams of funding are they depending
Mm,
on?
right.
Yeah. So I mean, I'll give one example from higher ed and one from K-12. So in higher ed, we were bringing cloud tools to researchers, and actually, we learned that most researchers could decide which technology they wanted to use more or less on their own, and didn't have to get things kind of cleared through administrators. The most important things to researchers is peers. I mean, that's the heart of their work, right? They look
Right.
at peers' work, they build on it to make discoveries. So they care about the peer recommendations, less so the sales pitch. And so we made it as easy as possible for them to try things out because they could decide on their own, created a credits program. We worked with an organization called Internet 2 that helps higher ed to evaluate solutions and bring those to higher ed. And so really it was all about, letting the trusted voices do the talking and
Yeah.
reach those decision makers. Now in K-12, I'll give an example, from Chromebooks. And, it was very interesting because when Chromebooks, they were invented when I joined Google back in around 2011. And
Yeah.
as soon as we got the devices in the hands of the schools, like there was great feedback. The problem was Google wasn't there talking to school systems. Like we weren't really at the table, where talking to the folks who are making the decisions about devices. And so what we ended up doing there, instead of building like a huge sales team and a huge marketing team, we worked with the resellers that schools were already working with, that they
Ah,
already trusted and were
yeah.
partnering with. So, I think with both of these examples, it shows you how you really need to understand the ecosystem, the users, buyers, and influencers. And if you do, it can help you scale. And if you don't, you may stall.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's interesting as you talk about the cloud buyers for higher ed. That those peer references are so key, and that's across a lot of industries, but very very particular for education. And I remember working with you on some of those customer references where it was just so important to show, hey, guess what? Your neighbor down the road is doing the same thing. So, and that's also interesting about the Chromebooks with the K through 12, just not understanding who the buyer technically was in that process and being able to figure that out, and then having to go through an indirect route, really, which was the best way to get to the buyers.
It really was.
Very interesting. All right. Well, now that we know who we're talking to, how do you draft messaging that really resonates with educators, administrators, and IT leaders in the space?
Yes. Well, I'm going to use the words of a longtime Google VP, Andy Burnt. And, one of the first things I learned at Google was from him. And he talked about how we need to know the user, know the magic, and connect the two. And so
Yeah.
the messaging is what connects the user and the audience with whatever powerful solutions that you have. And stick with the Chromebooks example. We really had two distinctive groups of audiences, of
Hmm.
adults that we had to break through to. We had the teachers who were going to be
Yeah.
using the devices and helping the students. Then you had the IT administrators. Now, for the teachers, the magic was about bringing the web to their classroom, bringing the whole world of learning like into their four walls. That was the beauty and the magic for them. For the IT administrators, they grabbed on to the effortless management. Everything was web based from an admin console. They didn't have to go
Right.
to each device and install software.
Yeah.
And the devices could be shared. So you can see here, it's kind of two differences. And it, really made me think about a mentor of mine, Joe Owen, who taught me, sometimes you are selling and marketing the features and the benefits, and sometimes you're selling and marketing hopes and dreams.
Yeah.
In this case, we were doing both for those distinct audiences. But there was one thing that was common across that we could anchor on, and that was about access.
Hmm.
For all of those adults, bringing in the web technology, making it accessible was key. And with the Chromebooks, I mean, they were about a fourth of the price of what other people, were selling at the time, and they could be shared. You
Yeah.
didn't have to have one for every student, nor did every third grader need one, all day at the time. So it was really interesting to think about, making sure that the messaging resonated across, but was tailored. Now, to do another example, though, and I know that many listeners may be in this situation, like, what if you're marketing something brand new and so you don't really know what the magic is yet? That was sort of the case when I joined a nonprofit called Teach First. So after I taught through the Teach for America program, there were some folks starting up a similar program in London. And I went
Mm.
over and I joined the founding team of the nonprofit. And when I got there, the team was sharing the insights that they got from their message testing. I mean, we didn't have the program yet. So how are we
Yes.
going to market this? And so testing is always so important. And
Totally.
what they found when they were talking to the college graduates, and that's who was the target for the program, the team found that folks were very motivated actually by helping their country, serving students, particularly those in need. But calling the program something like Teach for Britain or Teach for England was like a little bit hokey, and it didn't resonate with them
Uh-huh.
like that they weren't feeling that message. And so, it was such a reminder that even though there was that emotional drive there, you've got to speak to people with messaging in their language,
Yes.
that they use. I think as well, like really with both of those examples, like you've got to speak to the head and to the heart, but in their language.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Those are really interesting examples. That one about the Chromebooks, teachers absolutely making a huge advantage for them to get the whole World Wide Web as access to help their classrooms, which is
Yes.
huge. And then
Yes.
IT leaders, yeah, that absolutely makes sense. That's not something your everyday person is going to think about, but yeah, those IT leaders, they don't have to deal with every single laptop every single time, and so that management with the kind of a single web-based admin console, I'm sure was a huge selling point to them. So that
Yeah.
totally makes sense. And
Yeah.
yeah, as you can see, you mentioned about like connecting the dots between the magic and the user, and so I that's great. You were able to kind of understand that for that particular situation.
Yeah. It was really clear when you listened, when you heard. It was very clear.
Yeah, yeah. And then to your other point about speaking to the buyers in their language. And it's interesting. It's like you think about that in terms of like you translate, you know, certain messaging for different regions, and even for the UK. you had to tweak it just ever so slightly to be able to pick, to help them get what you're talking about, what your mission is, what your values are, and what product you're trying to sell. And so that's
Yes.
interesting. You would think it wouldn't be that different, but clearly your testing showed that it was, and that was great that you did it.
Yeah, and you can't just assume, right? Like when I first heard the name, I thought, oh, well, our educators gonna, react poorly to the phrase teach first as a name and a concept. Like that might sound like, oh yeah, just teach and then go on to other things. But actually, you have to listen. You have
Yeah,
to listen because my instinct would have been, I don't know, that name that might not be appropriate. Our important partners in our schools and our, academics might not get that we people truly are committed. And lo and behold, loads of the alumni are still in classrooms and making
yes,
huge change in education. So it really just shows how much you really do need to test messages and not just go with your own personal instincts.
yeah, yeah. And ultimately, as a product marketer, no one cares really about your opinion. They care about the customer's opinion. And that's what really
Hmm.
what should be driving the messaging, because we can come up with our own experiences, but when we talk to customers and get their feedback and their insight, that is gold. That's just critical information. So
Yes.
great that you were able to do that and get really set the foundation for what you were trying to achieve in that particular
Yeah,
situation.
and all credit to my colleagues there. It was fantastic work to build from.
Awesome. So next question is about timing. Timing's everything in marketing, but in education, it's even more structured. So how do academic calendars and budget cycles impact your go-to-market planning and campaign execution?
Yes, I will say here that, the calendar and timing is everything, and then I'll give you a but.
Okay.
So, absolutely, there is a clear academic calendar, right? And that kind of tells you when are people looking to learn about things, consider things, try them out, when might they have budget to pay for them, when might they roll them out. So in education, for the most part, and in the northern hemisphere, people are pretty busy back to school August, September, hard to
Yeah.
break through, very busy audiences. But October, November, December, people start listening. Oh, what's the new things? Like what's out there? Then they can pilot some things early in the new year.
Yeah.
And then, by May, June, a lot of folks have budget to spend, and that's where they want to make the decision about what they're going to roll out the following back to school year, especially so they can have time to deploy things, set them
Yeah.
up, and train everybody. So that calendar is really important. And, for marketers, it does mean especially that autumn time, that October, November, is such
Yeah.
an important time to have really clear messaging, integrated campaigns that feature, webinars, demo days, all the things so that you can meet folks, where they are when they're really considering.
Yeah.
Now, the but, having said that, is that pilots and trials can really happen anytime, right? They're usually small scale. And so, as marketers, I think it's so essential that we give folks simple ways just to taste or trial the solution, even if
Mm-hmm.
they can't get it in their hands. Marketing can do that. How do we bring that to life to wherever their eyeballs, their fingers are, so that they can get a flavor of it at any time of year?
Mm-hmm.
With Chromebooks, which I already talked about, to stick with that example, what we saw is a lot of folks when they first came out, they would get one Chromebook or maybe a set of 5 for a learning center.
Yeah.
But that wasn't where the real impact was happening. The real impact was happening where they had a full class set and it was charged. So what we did is we worked
Mm.
with a few partners. We did a promo where you got a class set with a charging cart, and we sold it at really a loss.
Interesting.
But it was
Okay.
worth it because it got the class sets in there. That's where you felt the transformational impact when there was a set in the English classroom or the 5th grade and it was used all day by lots of different students. So that was what was so key. Even though, like I said, it wasn't at a loss initially, it was the right way to do it, building off the insights of what we knew to really demonstrate, the magic that we talked about earlier. So, while I absolutely agree, marketers need to understand when they can reach their decision makers, they also need to kind of effortlessly make sure that there is always on a way that people can try and get a taste at any time.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. So you have to be aware of the timing, and with academia, it's obviously very structured, and you do need to be aware of what those buying cycles look like. And it is a little bit easier to see, yes, that first autumn time frame is probably a little crazy for them, but then you have time after that to kind of pitch to them and then hopefully help them make a decision by summertime. But then it's that's also, to your point, the second piece of your response about being available at any time, because some people might have free time in the autumn time frame, or they're late summer making a decision, and so you need to be available to them and show them at any point what your value is. And it sounds like that worked for you.
Yeah, I think especially because most of the time things start small.
Yeah.
One researcher, one innovative professor, one innovative teacher, IT director, maybe in a tiny district. And sure, of course, you hope you can have bigger impact. You hope you can get to more folks. But since it starts small, you might be talking about, really small spend people are authorized to make at any time. So yeah,
Yeah.
really making sure you have a way for people to have a taste and a trial, I think is just so important.
Yeah, I think that I like the way you put that, a taste. It's just about giving that trial. You get them just a little bit of experience with it, and then they see the value, and they're like, okay, yeah. Because it's one thing to read marketing messaging, it's one thing to see somebody else do a demo, but if you're actually doing and implementing it yourself, then you can be hooked.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And look, this is what educators do, right? Educators are hooking their students to
yeah,
unlock their excitement and to make it real and relevant. It's really kind of the same idea.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So now next topic is about trust. Education market really runs on relationships and credibility. How do you build that trust and demonstrate value in a way that really resonates with schools, districts, and universities?
Yes. Trust in education, obviously not a nice to have. It is a requirement. I mean,
Mhm.
it should be always, but of course, in these very important, you know, public sector systems, regulated industries, it is required. You have to have the trust. So, I'll speak to three levers that I think are really important and I try to keep top of mind. The first one is to anchor on the user voices.
Got it.
Hear what they're saying, hear what they love, amplify their words. And when they don't love something, get that feedback in. Marketing's a two-way street, especially
Yeah.
product marketing. Help make sure that feedback's coming in and close the loop back to folks, when you act on it. So, you want to amplify the true successes in their voices. So, these real authentic stories matter way more than a slogan. Like spend more time on the stories,
Yes.
than the slogan, getting those out there. The second thing I would say is, this probably sounds obvious, but the second tip is be ruthlessly truthful.
Hmm.
So make sure that claims are accurate, that claims are backed up by evidence. This is so important. And, unfortunately, I see people overpromising all the time in the education space and elsewhere. I mean, you look right now at all the flurry of activity with generative AI. And I see a lot of people overpromising. A perfect example would be AI detection. So
Hmm.
tools that help to find, was this paper written by AI?
Hmm.
And Stanford researchers, go Stanford, another alma mater.
Yeah. Yeah.
They went and they tested a bunch of these tools. Now, granted, this is last year, but what they found was that sometimes the detection tools worked, but particularly when a paper was written by a student for whom English was not their first language, the
Uh-huh.
detectors tended to say that it was using AI when it wasn't. So,
And
not only is this about like you don't have credibility, this is potentially doing harm. So we
yes.
just gotta have that data, have that evidence before you make claims, especially in education, right? Healthcare, these stakes are too high. So, I can't say enough about being, absolutely ruthless, in terms of the truth and the claims. And then the third thing, For education, of course, privacy and security are
Mhm.
so important.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as marketing, we can take what is a very complex set of concepts and we can simplify them. And we can make sure that the privacy and security information is easily discoverable, and easy to understand. Now, I think back about when we were trying to do better with the privacy and security information we had on our website. And I was testing this out with a bunch of users. I said, got to test things. So
Yeah.
some of the educators we knew well. And the page was called, the Trust Center. And I was testing it with some users. And one of them said, Trust Center? They said, trust is earned. It's not self-proclaimed. Oh, that really
Interesting.
stuck with me. So
Uh-huh.
I changed the name. It was called the Privacy and Security Center because
Uh-huh.
that's what it was. We'll see if we earn their trust. Hopefully we do, but we shouldn't be self-proclaiming that. That
Mhm.
really stuck with me.
That's so interesting. Yeah, that clearly is a good feedback that you got from your customers.
Very
So
useful.
kudos to you for that. So to summarize, that was 3, lead with the user voice. Really important to kind of always get that understanding. 2, be ruthlessly truthful, even in the face of if your product isn't performing in the way it should. In
Hmm.
fact, that sometimes can give you more credibility by admitting mistakes. And then 3, being crystal clear on privacy and security. That's a big topic for many industries, but obviously very important for education.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Like what's good here for education is good for everyone. And like there could be a lot of pressure on marketers. Let's say we're number one and let's
Uh,
do this. And of course, like, you want to share good news and you want to share the power of, hey, a lot of your peers have chosen this, but it's got to be truthful. It's got to be
yeah,
in the right language.
totally. Well, that was gold, Tia. Your
Mhm.
experience, your thoughtful approach about the education space, I think really shines through. So
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate the time you've been taking with us.
Oh,
But
thank you.
before we wrap up, we've got our rapid fire round.
Okay.
You ready for that?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. All right. So first question is, what's your favorite marketing tool?
mm. Gen AI tools, it's a tie between ChatGPT and Google Gemini. I use
Uh-huh.
both every day for all the
Yeah.
everyday things we do:
Yeah.
ideation, research, content creation. So, yeah, those two for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, those are definitely uh, at the top of the litter for sure for a lot of people. I definitely use it for my own purposes. So awesome. Second question: what's the most underrated skill in product marketing?
I would say just staying close to the users and the buyers, because the longer you're in a role, the longer you're in a company, the more success you have, it's so easy to lose the touch
Yeah.
with the reality, especially
Mhm.
if you're getting promoted. Or like for me, I was a former educator, but every year I get away from the classroom, I have to know, like, I'm losing that perspective. So
Right.
staying anchored in, especially important the longer you're in it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's good to kind of you recognize you're getting farther away from the actual consumer. So
Yeah.
having a pulse on that's important. So
Yeah, for sure.
next question is, what's the biggest mistake to avoid in product marketing?
Mm. I think marketing too widely, too quickly.
Hmm.
So, in the early days, you're working with these innovators, right? And they're the kind of people who are trying things out and they are forgiving. They're going to give you the feedback and they're going to be okay that you're constantly making updates and changes. Not everybody's okay with that, right? Then
Yeah.
you move to your early adopters and your early majority, right? You get bigger and bigger, and each time you're iterating. And, the messaging, particularly as you get more to the early majority in the mass market, it may not be the same, messaging that's resonating. So start small, make sure you're updating the marketing and the solution itself, and then keep refining and iterating as you go. I think, especially in education, it's about smart scaling rather than fast scaling.
Yeah. Yeah. And that resonates with something I think you said. one of our team meetings when we were industry marketing together. He said that industry marketing is intimate.
Mm.
And I thought that was relevant because you're able to not just talk about the technology, but how does that apply to your specific industry? And clearly, you are able to articulate that very well for the industry sector, for the education sector. So that definitely tracks. All right, next question is: what's one thing you wished you knew when you started?
Ooh. I would say one thing that I wish I knew when I started, and I wish I remembered still now, is the importance of outside inspiration. We
Mm,
all get in there, the day to day, right? You don't pick your head up. And I would suggest there to everybody, including myself, just pick one thing you're going to do every week. Just one thing. Maybe it's like every Friday, 30 minutes with a podcast or a piece of a book. It's a 30-minute virtual coffee with a customer or a former colleague. Just do one thing. It doesn't have to be 1,000 things, but I do think that this keeps you fresh, and that you need that. You need that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so easy to get stuck in your lane and
Mm-hmm.
inside your company, inside your team. And I think that's so smart to be able to, listen to a podcast. I remember you recommended me. It was How to Have a Good Day, that book. That was very,
Yes, Caroline Webb's How to Have a Good Day. I had the pleasure of working with her at
yeah,
McKinsey and calling her friend. And I'll tell you, she walks the walk. So the book's not just packed with neuroscience and
yeah.
anecdotes and case studies, but she did this. And in fact, that was why I was just saying pick one thing a week. One of her big points is like, you don't need to bite off more than you could chew. Just pick one thing, right?
Yep,
Stick with it. Don't overwhelm yourself.
absolutely. I remember reading that after your recommendation. Did find it
Oh,
very valuable. So, yes, spend time outside of your lane.
yeah.
All right. And the last and most important question: favorite podcast?
Yes, it has to be Everyday AI. They literally put it out live every day. I don't know how Jordan and the team do it. And it is incredibly useful. And look, if you don't have time to listen to the whole thing, you could use AI to bring about the key points so you can benefit. So, yeah, Everyday AI is my podcast recommendation.
I love it. It's very meta. It's
It
like
is very meta. Exactly. Use the AI to learn about the AI.
exactly. Well, this has been all great, Tia. Thank you so much for joining us. I think this was really packed with a lot of insights for anyone in marketing or thinking about the education space.
Oh, well,
So
thank
thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you so much. Like you said, I think, look, I'm talking about education, but there are so many parallels. So I hope that, yeah, all the listeners get at least, one idea of something that they can try. And thank you again for having me.
You bet. And to everyone else tuning in, thanks again for listening to another episode of Porter's Product Marketing Podcast. If you like this episode, please don't forget it to subscribe, to leave a review, or share it with a colleague. Until next time, keep learning, keep listening, and keep making your messages matter.